right, we begin this morning with developing news out of the Middle East, where Hezbollah has sent drones into northern Israel, wounding almost 70 people, some critically, in what is a major breach of Israel's Iron Dome defence system.
It comes amid America's plan to send an advanced anti-missile system to help protect Israel from Iran, and a violent escalation in the stoush between Israel and UN peacekeepers in Lebanon. Our Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran is across all the latest from Jerusalem.
Much has been made throughout the course of this conflict in the Middle East about the strength of Israel's air defence systems, the so-called Iron Dome, which can shoot down threats before they hit Israeli territory and threaten the local population. And that is why this incident is of particular concern to Israeli authorities. Not only did the Iron Dome not fire this drone out of the sky, but also air raid sirens across the north of Israel were not activated, giving people in and around the town of Binyamina in the country's north any warning that this drone was indeed en route to their part of the country. It appears, and certainly based on how Hezbollah has now taken responsibility for this attack, it appears that the target was an Israeli Defence Force base, with Hezbollah now saying that Israelis need to keep away from military bases into the future. And this is a very fluid situation. The number of casualties continues to grow, and investigations have already been launched as to how indeed this happened. We know that this follows a weekend of further conflict, further military offensives in southern Lebanon, with the Israeli Defence Force saying that it continues to target Hezbollah assets, both fighters and weapons stockpiles in southern Lebanon. But it's also led to an interesting flashpoint between the Israeli Defence Force, the Israeli government and the United Nations. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, making a demand to the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres to withdraw UN peacekeepers from southern Lebanon, saying that Hezbollah are using their positions and their posts as a cover for further attacks into Israel.
Mr. Secretary-General, get the UNIFIL forces out of harm's way. It should be done right now, immediately.
As that warning was issued, an Israeli tank actually broke down the main gate of a UN peacekeeping base in southern Lebanon. Israel says it did so to avoid fire from Hezbollah assets, but the United Nations says it is a further disregard of the unique place that its personnel hold under international law, and it's putting their personnel, Israel's actions are putting their personnel at significant risk. While all this has happened in the north of Israel and over into southern Lebanon, there has been continued, sustained and intense bombardment of Gaza over the weekend, particularly around the Jabalia refugee camp in the north of Gaza. This is an area where tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians have tried to seek some sort of shelter, some sort of safety, but over the course of the last few days they have found themselves in the line of fire once more. Aid agencies and locals that the ABC has spoken to over the weekend have said that evacuation orders have been issued by Israel, but the intensity of the fighting means that many people have not been able to flee, and also they don't have anywhere else to go. We know that this is a very precarious situation. Aid cannot get into the Jabalia refugee camp. Aid workers are among those who are trapped there as a result of this campaign, and the hospital system is also on the brink of collapse there too. Israel says it is merely targeting Hamas operatives who are using this densely packed pocket of northern Gaza to reform, to regroup. However, today local authorities, or local media I should say, have been reporting that some of that intelligence may not be as watertight as Israel is publicly stating.
Matt Doran reporting there. Got some breaking news coming in from the United States. We're learning police in California say they've charged a man with gun offences after arresting him near an event being held by former President and Republican candidate Donald Trump. Officers say they stopped a 49-year-old Las Vegas man at a checkpoint near Mr Trump's rally, which has just finished in the Coachella Valley. They allege this man was in possession of a shotgun, a loaded handgun, a high-capacity magazine and reportedly fake media passes. Police say the incident did not impact the safety of the former president or the attendees at the event. More on this from our North America Bureau Chief, Jade McMillan, in about 5 minutes' time. Let's come back home now. And today marks 1 year since Australia voted to reject the First Nations voice to Parliament. 12 months on, people on both sides have been airing their thoughts for a special ABC program, Australia, What Do You Reckon? ABC Indigenous Affairs reporter Tahnee Jash joins us now. Tahnee, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
What's the program about?
So the program was really a bit of a temperature test, I guess, on how Australians are feeling 12 months on from the referendum. And so what we've done is really interviewed 8 people. So they range from politicians to people who were key players in the campaign for both sides of the vote, as well as everyday Australians, to get their thoughts on how they're feeling about the referendum a year on. Was it a big deal for them? What impact did it have on them? But also other really interesting questions around, what was their experience like with learning First Nations history at school, to really get a bit of an insight into the individual and how that may have, or how that shapes their worldview, really. There were some really interesting themes and threads that came out of the program, which I'll talk about a little later. But just to give you a little snippet of how people are feeling today on the anniversary of the Voice Referendum, we'll take a quick listen to what some of them had to say.
This sentence: 12 months on from the referendum, I feel...
What I do feel most about it is that we wasted $450 million on a vote that we never needed to have.
It was clear that Aboriginal people wanted it. It's birthed a generation of young Indigenous leaders, and like I say, 6.5 million Australians walked with us, and constitutional recognition has not gone away just because the referendum was unsuccessful.
Former Minister Linda Burney there. Now, Tahnee, the team has interviewed people from different parts of the country and from both sides of the vote. Were there any, I guess, interesting themes or threads that came out of that?
There were, Michael. There were quite a few interesting themes with some of the questions that we asked. So one of them was, we often hear this phrase, Australia, in Australia you get a fair go. And so that was one of the questions that we put to the people that we were interviewing, and there were sort of mixed reactions to that question. And I guess that's based off of the person's experience and what they had gone through growing up. There was also, mixed reactions around, as we just heard there, around the referendum and the result of the referendum. But there was one thing that all of our talent agreed on, and that was the statistic around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people dying from suicide at really, was a leading cause of death for people aged between 15 and 44 years old. And that was something that everyone that we interviewed had agreed needs to change. But it's been a really sort of interesting experiment, if you like, to hear from a range of people on both sides of the vote, and sort of what informed their vote or what influenced their vote, and what they experienced. A lot of Aboriginal people that we spoke to for this program spoke about, the racism that they experienced, some of the division that they went through, not necessarily within their own community, but through with other members of the community. And then a lot of people also spoke about the way forward, and truth-telling was a really big theme that came up that a lot of people agreed with as the way forward. But to give you a little glimpse into some of the interesting questions and some of the themes and threads that came up, we've got a quick clip here to play for you now.
Is Australia a country where everyone gets a fair go?
Why are Indigenous affairs so polarising?
97% of this country decide the fate of 3%.
Would you consider yourself a proud Australian?
This land was taken from us.
What was your last experience with racism?
Is reconciliation dead?
Our voices are constantly silent.
Australian people always get it right.
And so you can watch the full program on ABC News In Depth YouTube channel, and also we've got a really lovely profile piece on ABC News where you can hear more from the talent that we've interviewed about the referendum and the way forward.
Very much looking forward to it, Tahnee. Thank you.
Well, let's go back to that breaking news about Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's another security scare facing him, this time near an event in California. Police arrested a man at a checkpoint outside the rally yesterday who they allege was carrying a shotgun, a handgun and a high-capacity magazine. The rally continued as planned and police are about to provide an update. We'll bring that to you when it happens.
Bruce Lehrmann's battle to appeal against findings in his failed defamation case against Network 10 will face a critical challenge in the federal court today. Bruce Lehrmann wants to appeal against a ruling that, on the balance of probabilities, he did rape Brittany Higgins at Parliament House in 2019. The ruling, on an interview aired on The Project, meant Network 10's truth defence was upheld. But before an appeal can run, Mr Lehrmann needs the court to delay an order that he pay $2 million in costs to 10, while the network is seeking $200,000 in security before any appeal. Bruce Lehrmann's criminal trial was abandoned with no findings against him, and he maintains his innocence.
Tasmania's Labor opposition and crossbenchers have found enough votes to pass a no-confidence motion in Treasurer and Deputy Premier Michael Ferguson. Independent David O'Byrne has joined Labor, the Greens and crossbenchers Andrew Jenner and Christy Johnston in calling for the Deputy Premier to go. It follows evidence from TT Lyne's leadership about the government's role in the Spirit of Tasmania replacement project. In a statement, Premier Jeremy Rockliff says Minister Ferguson has his full support.
A 23-year-old man has been charged with serious driving offences after a fatal collision in Melbourne's southeast. Police say 3 people were struck by a car at a Kooyong party early yesterday morning. 1 died at the scene. The alleged driver has been remanded to face Melbourne Magistrates Court today.
New bail reforms dubbed Declan's Law are expected to pass through Northern Territory Parliament. The reforms will rule out bail for serious violent offenders and expand police powers to use wands to detect edged weapons. The legislation was named after murdered bottle shop worker Declan Laverty, who was stabbed to death in a Darwin bottle shop in March last year.
And SpaceX pulled off its boldest test flight yet by successfully catching a booster rocket back on the launching pad. There it is. The launch tower Mechazilla used mechanical arms to catch the first stage booster 7 minutes after it blasted off. SpaceX has been recovering the first stage boosters of its Falcon 9 rockets for 9 years, recycling them and speeding up the launch rate.